Welcome to the National Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal weekly webcast series. My name is Ashley Cope and I'm the marketing manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I would just like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question or chat box and they will be brought up at the end. This session will also be recorded and available on our website. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Victor Rocha, Conference Chairman of the National Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm glad you messed up and I didn't run the very beginning. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Victor Rocha. I'm the Conference Chairman for the National Gaming Association. My co-host Jason Giles will be here in a second. Welcome. This is a really interesting webcast and a very special one because it's something that I feel that's been it's a very important part of our growth, and that is the use of technology, embracing the new to become better business people and better entrepreneurs. And during this pandemic, as we all know, we've had so many different changes, and our whole world turned upside down. And I think one of the important things going forward is that we are focused on getting this right as we reopen. And more importantly, a lot of time in talking to people and talking to GMs and tribal leaders and tribal people. One of the things that's becoming very obvious is that we as business people and entrepreneurs have really grown these beautiful casinos and these monuments to commerce. But yet they've become very top heavy and they've become very expensive. And, the pandemic forced us to cut back. And I think it really opened up an insight into how bloated we have become as an industry. And I think one of the ways that we address this issue is becoming more efficient, more effective in our business. And one of the ways we do this is by embracing the use of AI. And that's what my two guests are here to help me explain to you and help me understand the importance of AI going forward and the importance of making sure that our casinos are run properly and run effectively. And this is how we're going to make sure that our children get the same opportunities that we get as Native Americans. And so that's kind of where the foundation for this idea came from. And so with that, I would like to introduce you to my guests. First, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Anastasia Baran, a dear friend, COO of nQube Data Science from Winnipeg, Canada. Stacy, welcome. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks very much for having me, Victor.
Wow, thank you. And then also my very good friend, Stuart Kerr, Chief Data Scientist for ThinkingGraphs. Also, Stu, welcome. How are you doing?
It's an honor to be here, Victor. Thank you.
Okay, before I start, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Stu, let's start with you first. Could you give our audience a little background?
Was that Stu?
Yeah, Stu.
Okay, well, I apologize for missing that cue. I'm basically a new person in the tribal resort and casino space. I actually came from the national intelligence world, applying basically some of the same tools that we're going to talk about today for national intelligence. And I needed to take some time off, to be honest with you, after doing that. And then I'll say a headhunter called and said, hey, how would you like to work for a tribal resort and casino? And I said, what's that? And after doing some research, I was all in. And for the last 5 years, I've been the lead data scientist at Pechanga Resort and Casino, and have also founded during the pandemic, thinkingGraphs. So that's a quick snapshot of my background.
Thank you so much, Stu. And Stacy, can you give our audience a little bit of your background, please?
Sure. So like Stu, I did not come from gaming originally. I'm a former academic. I was working actually using similar techniques for breast cancer detection for a number of years. Being in the world of medical devices, it's a highly regulated space. And, so naturally to get away from the regulation, I moved into gaming. So yeah, didn't exactly avoid that particular piece, but I love being in gaming now. A lot of the problems, the huge data sets that are available, it's just a natural world for a scientist, I believe. So it's been really great. I've been in the space for about it's 5 or 6 years now, although that's probably an underestimate, using AI to optimize slot floors and solve other problems in casinos.
You know, that's one of the things that I love about this industry is when people from outside the industry first step inside, they're always, you always see the enthusiasm and for the problem solving in this industry, because it's just always one problem after another, and especially if you're working with the tribes in Indian country, you know, you're really helping, you know, Native American tribes run their businesses better, and I think there's a real benefit to that. I know a lot of people feel better about themselves that working with the tribes is a real you're really making a difference. You know what I mean? So, you know, and so before we start, you know, my first question is, you know, Stacey, we'll start with you. What is your definition of AI? You know, it's just so we're all on the same page. What is artificial intelligence?
Geez, I mean, I feel like that should be a basic question,
know.
but it's actually a tough question. I mean, I suppose, you know, it's machines demonstrating some sort of intelligence. It's machines doing something that humans traditionally can't do. Or maybe it's machines doing something that humans can traditionally can't do, but machines can't. So, you know, that I believe is really, you know, a general terms artificial intelligence definition. But really, I want to add to that AI is really about giving humans the tools they need to solve difficult problems. And I feel like there's a bit of a fear associated with AI sometimes, but I think it's really about helping people out and, you know, giving them those power tools that they need to be able to solve tough problems.
Does the word StarNet mean anything to you? Just kidding.
Oh dear.
Yeah, exactly. For those of you who don't know, StarNet's from an old movie about AI, about the computers taking over the world and stuff like that. And I think that's probably where a lot of the fear comes from. Stu, same question to you, sir.
Yeah, I would say, you know, Stacey probably runs into this all the time where you ask 10 different people for a definition of AI, you'll get 10 different answers. And, you know, to keep it, you know, Stacey hit it on the head. Fundamentally, it's the ability of machines to learn from experience and perform tasks, you know, normally associated with humans. Whether it is things like detecting objects, solving complex problems, making decisions, basically tasks being performed typically associated with humans that machines can now do. Now, the great thing is, you know, this is old stuff, to be honest with you. Stacey, you know, if you go back in time, this dates back to the 50s. But thank goodness for technology. You have computers increasing in power, decreasing in price, decreasing in size. So now AI is being used in retail, banking, what are some other areas? Finance, sports, healthcare, as Stacey had mentioned. Perhaps the most visual, and a lot of people are probably are aware of this, perhaps I think one of the most popular uses of AI today is with autonomous vehicles. And when you think about what you know, the sensory input for a human while driving a car is roughly 90% visual. You know, that's a sensory input. So AI literally is teaching a car to see and then interpret, you know, what does a rolling ball across the road mean? You know, what action should I take? So AI is really, in that particular case, teaching cars how to see and drive. And when you think about the impact, you know, when you think long-term, will this affect resorts and casinos? Sure. Think about valet parking. You know, that'll go away. And, you know, this is going to happen faster than everybody thinks, but probably valet will go away in probably maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah,
that's a great,
yeah.
I like to use that example.
Well, you know, it just seems that, you know, in the beginning, to get artificial intelligence, it was a thing of the military. It was government contracting and stuff like that. And I think with computerizing, you know, you just see the accessibility now for people that has this technology now is at your fingertips and available to everyone now. You know what I mean? So I think that's really the big difference in the last 5 to 10 years. You know, you really see the big. It's everywhere, you know, like you said, you know, in driving car. I just spoke with Roberto Coppola, who was with Aristocrat, and during the pandemic, Aristocrat was one of the first people to start laying people off, and Roberto found another job, and he's now working with Panasonic, doing this exact same thing that you're talking about. So he went from gaming to autonomous vehicles, and just the other way, you know.
Just the other way
So
around.
yeah, just the other way around. So in regards, so you know, we understand now AI is that big math a monster we were so worried about, but yet, you know, when you harness it, it has a lot of really practical uses, like Stacey said, you're working with breast cancer and stuff like that. But so what has changed since the pandemic has hit for us? What happened? Stacey, you can take this one.
Sure. So, I mean, I can speak specifically to what, you know, what we've been doing as an AI company is, you know, before the pandemic, is we were using AI to optimize slot floors. You know, that was really important for gaming as a business, and we're able to find efficiencies in slot floors, tell people, you know, this is what you should buy, this is what you should retire from your floor. And this pandemic hits, and all of a sudden the entire industry is flipped on its head, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we apply AI technology to help people now? Because, you know, obviously no one's looking to buy slot machines on March 2020. So for us, what we ended up shifting to are two things. So one, we started looking at slot floor reductions. So all of a sudden we see that, you know, lots of people are reducing capacity, they're shutting down sections of their floor, they are shutting off every other machine. I mean, there was a bunch of different varieties of techniques that operators were employing to be able to reduce their floors. And so we started looking at, how do you do this strategically? You know, how do we use AI to make the right decisions on which machines to shut off? Because the casino business is already going to be hurting. So how do we mitigate that as much as possible by giving the players that are coming back the type of content that they want to see? So it was really about switching up the problem we were trying to solve and looking at slot floor reductions. Now, another thing that we started looking at was simulations. And, you know, while not specifically AI, what they let us do was follow players around on the floor, understand how they interact in the pre-pandemic casino, but also a reduced capacity casino. So we were able to tell casino operators and governments in many cases, you know, what does your floor look like? How is COVID actually going to spread on your floor? Is it a safe space? And, you know, I mean, I can't speak to every particular scenario right now, but what we were finding, I mean, casinos are these large open spaces. And if you're choosing entertainment options in terms of safety, it was actually a very, it was a good option in most cases. If casinos were doing the right things to keep their customers safe, then it was a good entertainment option during the pandemic. So those are two, that's how our business shifted. I mean, obviously now vaccines are rolling out, things have been open for a while. So the problem has changed, but that's essentially what our pandemic looked like.
How has the data changed? I mean, has the pandemic, it seems to me like everything that we knew is turned upside down. The historic data has now changed. We had a year where everything is completely different. And what does this mean going forward?
I mean, that's an excellent question. So the casino industry's data is amazing, and you have decades worth of relatively stable data that AI could just eat up and spit out predictive results. And then all of a sudden there's a 3-month gap in many cases, sometimes more than that. And then who knows what strategy was implemented. So maybe you'll see 100% carded play. Maybe it's 100% uncarded play because you didn't want that extra touch point. Maybe machines are on and off. So the data is just a complete, it's all novel, right? So for a human being to go in there, even if they're a good analyst or if they're, you know, a very intuitive person, it's going to be impossible for a human to actually fish out all of those, you know, those different relationships that were happening during that pandemic data set. So we really need to turn to technology, turn to AI to be able to, you know, actually extract insights and efficiencies out of that data set.
Stu, same question to you. How do you think that how would a data scientist like you, now that you're looking at this information, everything has changed? How do you embrace this issue?
Well, I would, you know, Stacey brings up some very good points. I would say the basic equation that defines the reason why a resort and casino would want to begin using this technology whether it's from a, prototyping, experimentation, rolling out into production, the basic equation of those reasons, because of the pandemic, has not changed. That equation has not changed at all. It has brought up some unique use cases, COVID tracing and things like that you can do with AI. But that fundamental equation, why resorts and casinos should be using this technology, has not changed. What the pandemic has done, it has put the limelight on, accentuated, highlighted some of the reasons in that equation why you should be doing it because of the pandemic. One is to compete more effectively. It's a competitive world out there. You want to be able to do that more effectively using technology. And I think the second reason is to do more with less. That's always been there. Are you going to hire back your entire staff that you had prior to pandemic? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but I think, I'll be honest with you, I tend to be an optimist, but I would say in this particular case, I'll say I don't know, Stacy may disagree with me, but the more technically literate resorts and casinos out there, the more data savvy management there is, they will see this as an opportunity to rework, manually intensive workflows. But, at the end of the day, I would say that, innovative thinking is rare, but courage is even in shorter supply. So we'll see who takes advantage of this.
It just seems like there's just so much opportunity right now, and there really is. And my big concern is that is AI an issue? The democratization of information and data, is this still flying over the heads of the small casinos? How do they participate in this new information rush? Stacey, well, you can answer. Or you go ahead, Stu. Go ahead, I'll take you, sir.
Sorry, Stacey.
I just throw them out there, man.
I jumped the gun of you. Order, and I'll. So I would say, from what I've seen, this is experience, that resorts and casinos, particularly tribal, have the tendency to jump on a bandwagon, to look at that shiny bright object and say, let's bring this in and do something, and then it fails, and then the tendency is to give up. Oh, it didn't work. That's great that you see the opportunity, but you first need to figure out how you're going to apply it. Now, why am I going to bring this technology in instead of just bringing it in, throw it against the wall, and hope something sticks? You need to identify some specific, use cases, and therein lies the rub. And I'll tell you why. One is management, where I would think in general, they can be aptly described as familiarity is often mistaken for knowledge. And when you think about the pandemic and the effect that has, when you come in as an AI analyst or data scientist and say, we'd like to re-engineer this workflow, we'd like to increase the output or increase the speed, do something, say by 10%. The tendency on management is to, go back to an old pair of comfortable shoes that they've been wearing for a long time because it feels good, even though you're handing them a pair of super performing Nikes that are going to make them run 10 times faster. The tendency is to revert to the mean and go back to something that they're very comfortable with. I'm used to doing this. I don't want to, upset things. So that's one obstacle that is being looked at. And the other one is artificial intelligence is built on layers. There's certain givens that it needs, clearly math, clearly computers, but in order to make it breathe, in order to give it life and to make it, be effective, is it needs data. And at the enterprise level, getting data, Stacy talked about, there's large repositories of data. That's true. But getting that combined for AI at the enterprise level is a very difficult thing to do. And there's a variety of reasons. I don't want to go into the details, but one of the most fundamental reasons is tribal resort and casinos, the data architecture is built on 1970s technology. And when you try to bring in this new bright, shiny object that's going to increase player loyalty, increase your performance, increase operational efficiency with this new technology, and you try to match it with that 1970s plumbing that you have, there's an impedance mismatch. There's a mismatch there. So I would say the two recommendations, Victor, is management rethink, or God forbid, have to wait for the old guard to go in the pipeline and bring the new guard in, or rethink things and how you can become more efficient and compete more effectively, and then look at your data architecture. Because I'm sure Stacy's run into this, is that it's a you dig underneath the floor and look at the plumbing to try and get the data out. It's very difficult.
Yeah, Stace, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that that Stu said, but maybe I'll add a positive spin to it as well, because it was kind of talking about the obstacles that you may face, and that's completely fair. We've encountered all of these things in our time in gaming, but I think that I don't think that AI is just for a mega resort. So I think that there really is something for everybody, for every size of casino. And like Stu said, it's really about identifying the problem and making that problem accessible to that particular casino. So if you're looking at a full-on resort management solution, obviously you're not going to go to a 100, 200 machine casino and try to sell that to them. So it's really about finding the appropriate problem that's going to uplift the business for that particular casino. So, and it's really interesting, we're talking about these hurdles in terms of data accessibility and in terms of management. And I find that there's like a whole breadth of people out there, right? There's so many enthusiastic people in addition to the folks that are let's say non-believers in AI, or putting on those old comfortable shoes, as Stu said. And that enthusiasm is amazing. And I have to say, coming into the casino industry, it was really the Native American gaming space that was the first that wanted to start talking about this technology. And that was incredibly exciting as somebody that's enthusiastic about AI in this industry. So I think there's really something for everybody. And, I don't think it's a topic that should be written off just because of the size of a casino. I think everybody's really looking to innovate, and like Victor said, there's a lot of opportunity right now.
Well, you bring up a really interesting issue that I've seen again and again over the years, which is the smaller casinos want to participate, they want to be a part of it, but sometimes they don't know how to get there. Sometimes what my tribe, Pachunga or Foxwoods does, just seems so out of reach, to a smaller casino in Idaho or something, Yeah. And so I think one of the big issues or the big surprises has been this, democratization of information and the ease and the use of it. But I think the important thing is to have someone like a Stacy or a Stu to help you understand these complicated issues, because as Stu said, if you can bring in AI and then, a lot of these things don't communicate. It reminds me of the computer problems in the early 2000s when you're trying to get printers and everything to we're all going to have this wired community, but nothing spoke to each other, and that took a while for us to get the world, together, to communicate again. And I think in AI, that's a big issue. You have all these systems, and I've heard horror stories, and and Stacey and I were talking about this the other day. You hear these horror stories about companies coming in and they're going to solve all your problems, and they just show you have more problems, what I mean? So you end up just putting out more fires and stuff like that. So and this question is to both of you. What is the pandemic change? What happened? I know, again, another very broad general, but what happened? I mean, we talked about the historical data. We talked about customer acquisition and stuff like that. But now you see this real resurgence. You see with sports betting. You see with I think what's really important going forward, obviously, is the casino floor and the value that we have there, and that we make sure we take care of it. But you see the whole sports betting thing really getting legs, and everybody coming out and stuff like that, embracing it. So how is AI, how should the tribes look at AI? Sorry, I dropped my pen.
Stu, would you like to speak to that, or should I go first?
Boy,
Either.
that could take this could take an
Yeah,
hour,
a big
Victor, in
question.
terms of just that question by itself. When you think about, some things definitely don't warrant AI. I'll give you, an example. Smoking. So smoking was banned at a lot of properties because the virus was assumed it could be carried upon the vapors or the particles of that's generated by smoking a cigarette, and it would have the tendency to spread more. So people started analyzing the effect of non-smoking, or where should we put smoking. Stacy mentioned traffic patterns. There was I'll give you one use case, Victor, that's going to have legs in other situations where machine learning was used for contact tracing. So we built a system for guess who. And so what it did was you can't do this with the current siloed architecture that is rampant in for data architectures and tribal resorts and casinos, because the technology is 70s technology. You can't do something like go back in time really quickly across multiple guests and figure out if someone had called into a resort and casino, say the CDC calls or the local hospital, they call up Department of Public Safety or some other compliance organization and say, guest A has just tested positive, and they said they were at your property. Right away, the casino springs into action, and let's just assume they're a rated guest with a membership card. They use that card throughout the properties, slots, tables, point of sales, kiosks, you name it. So we built a tracing system to identify everything that they've touched. Simply by putting in an account number, a membership number. And then, we had, I believe, a policy of cleaning slots, wiping them down, I think every half hour or hour. I don't recall the exact time. But then we would go back into the data and get everyone that has touched that machine an hour after that person left, and the machines next to that machine. And then trace back those people, what machines did they go to, and do the same process over and over to a certain point. You have to stop at some point and say, this is sufficient. Did they stay in the hotel? What floor, which hotel tower did they stay in? Which floor? Who else had a room next to them? Because they could be touching the elevator buttons and transmitting the virus that way. So we had that in place within about a week because the technology was there. I'll say Pechanga has really forward-thinking management in terms of, this we can leverage this. We have a lot of data. How can we use it now that the pandemic's hit? How can we make our guests more safe? You tried to provide a safe environment to be entertained. Pandemic just introduced a new variable in that safety equation called a virus. And now, everything that somebody touches, never mind a violent person coming in, now you have this virus that you can't see, impacting the safety of your guests. So to be able to provide within a minute or two, this essentially a report of whatever this guest touched, who else we should contact to let them know that go get tested. That was a pretty powerful thing built rather quickly. One, because the technology was already in place. That was a big step. If you had to start from scratch, it wouldn't have taken a week, it would have taken a month. And then, management. I talked about management before and gave the, the dismal old shoe metaphor. but the management saw the potential of this being applied to increasing the safety of our guests. And Stacy brought up some examples as well. And contact tracing was just an amazing thing that came out of all this.
You know, I know for a fact with my tribe, you know, it was really important that health and safety was important. You know, we stopped smoking, you know, and we've talked to this on other programs, the importance, you know, the revenue that it generates. But for my tribe, we felt that it was very important that we show our customers that we're serious about this. And so for us, and by the way, we're still non-smoking. So that was for my tribe, that was a choice that the management and the tribe made, and something that I think we're all glad that we did, you know. So Stacy, you know, now, you know, going back, and you know, one of the things that I noticed, you know, when I went to my casino, every other slot machine was turned off. So what's this going to do for the data, for the historical and the predictive data going forward? You know, is next year going to be a wash or what?
That's a good question. Let's see. It's really interesting because I think, you know, we've reached that point in the pandemic, or almost post. I mean, I don't want to say post-pandemic, but I think everybody understands we're in a very different place right now than we were last March or April. And we're looking back at this data, and it's like, what do we do with this? We're trying to figure out now, is this a trend that's going to continue? So are we in the new normal, or are things going to eventually stabilize and go back to what they were? And it's a really interesting problem from an AI perspective. So first of all, you have to be able to answer that question. And also, if an AI, and I say this like not particularly in a committed way, because there are different types of AI, but typically an AI requires a scenario to have already happened in order to be able to predict what's going to happen. So it's learning from past events in order to make predictions about the future. Now, if it's seeing something completely new, you know, its predictions are not necessarily going to be as accurate as they were in the past when you had that long, stable data set. So I think a lot of folks that are using AI right now are trying to figure out, you know, what's next. Now, one thing that I think is incredibly interesting about the data set over the last year, and again, it's not going to be for every casino that's out there, but many of the people that I've spoken with saw a huge demographic shift. And I think it's known that, you know, a lot of the older players, they weren't ready to come back right away. And you saw a lot of younger players in many areas because bars were closed, nightclubs were closed, and they were really looking for an entertainment option. So one thing that we're seeing in the data that we didn't always have before was, you know, I hate using this term, but millennials are now in our data. So it's not just about guessing how to get millennials to the casino now, or, you know, trying to figure out what kind of machines to build for them, but we can actually now see what machines they were playing, how they were behaving on the floor when they were in the casino. So this pandemic might have provided our industry with the opportunity to actually figure out how to get that next generation of players into the casino. And without AI, I mean, I'm sure, you know, there is a certain amount of work that can be done without AI, but there's a huge opportunity here that can be harnessed with the proper algorithms to be able to figure out how do we curate our content for this next generation of players, because we can now see what they enjoy. So I just think there's a tremendous opportunity there. I think that's going to be the next shift in what we're doing with casinos.
I think that's fascinating. You know, actually, it's much better than my idea for attracting millennials, which was dig a big hole and put a DJ in the bottom. So
that works too. That works too.
I think your idea is much better than mine. But so how are we going to use AI now going forward with this for retention and stuff like that? Now we have these people, you know, and they really have been the unicorn for the industry for the last 5 years. You know what I mean? The millennials, the change and stuff like this. So it seems like, you know, this seems like a really, it's really interesting. You know, I never thought about it in that way. But I did see it. You know, I did go and I did see the young people on the floor. I did see the shift. And, you know, a lot of older people that didn't want to be in the casino or didn't want to leave home, and they were, you know, in the risk group, they did stay home. So I think that's really fascinating. I hadn't thought about it in that way. What do you think, Stu?
I think spot on with basically the demographic that Stacy talked about. I don't know where to draw the line, 60 and older, 55 and older. that more vulnerable, it was in all the news, right? You are more vulnerable to this virus at your age. So naturally they shied away. But thank goodness, not only for the resorts and casinos, of course, but the vaccines are rolling out. So we're seeing that group definitely come back in. Some things that we did see, particularly in California, where the governor basically shut down card rooms and other venues for gambling. Reservate tribes were the only game in town. So suddenly in the data, we started seeing, so I would say, there are algorithms being running all the time in certain places to detect potential VIP players. So it's like, okay, who in real time, we can identify who a potential VIP player is, and we basically send someone there to say, thank you for your patronage. What on earth can I do for you? The player loyalty, right? And we saw that as a huge potential win for securing player loyalty of a segment we didn't have access to before. So to be able to identify, Stacy mentioned the millennials. There was a whole weird segment of people that probably had never been to tribal resorts and casinos who we're identifying in real time and perhaps stealing from, we've heard that from people coming from those smoky card rooms that, oh my God, I never knew this place was here. It's gorgeous. This is a real resort and casino. And to capture that opportunity, this is the competitiveness that I talked about earlier. The opportunity to compete more effectively. When you have these algorithms constantly running 24/7, analyzing the data that's going across, whether it's your floor, entertainment complex, whatever, and assessing the situation, it knows that this is unusual. This is the lowest card member who just signed up for a card is playing like a potential VIP. That's unusual. That's an anomaly, and you want to understand it, and you want to turn that into player loyalty. You want to capture that. So I guess that's perhaps unique that happened to California. I'm not sure in other states that this happened, but that's one of the anomalous
I think it was pretty much across the country or the world even, but especially here in the United States, the tribes were some of the only ones up. Stacy, he brings up an interesting a question, which is, now that we have, the data that we had from last year seems a little bit off, and now we're getting in all these new numbers and these new players and stuff like that. How can we use AI to retain these people? How do we keep them, especially now that the world's opening up again? They just announced that Disneyland's open. They announced yesterday 50% capacity for movie theaters and stuff like that. So it seems like we were given a really unique opportunity here, right?
Yeah. So, I think Stu was talking about it as well. So there are algorithms that are, running in a lot of casinos that are looking for anomalous behavior. They're looking for potential VIPs with the goal of, pushing offers to retain them. I'll speak to it from kind of a perspective that I typically take, is that for me, it's about curating content to make those players happy. So it's not necessarily about pushing offers. I completely understand that is a huge part of getting people to the casino. But another part of it is getting them to stay once they get there and letting them have a good time. So I think what that data is going to allow us to do, and allow AI to do, is to figure out, and you were talking about sportsbook before. So on a smaller scale, although small scale, what slot content, for example, do these players want? If slot content at all, maybe they're table players. Do they want a sports book? What entertainment options are they looking for? So really, the opportunity for AI spans from everything from a very particular application, whether that be for pushing marketing offers or determining slot content, all the way to, and Stu is a much better person to discuss this than I am, but all the way up to a complete business strategy optimization. So in order to retain those players, I think it's not just about those particular applications, but looking at the business as a whole and determining, what's next for us, what content is important to the players that we want to attract.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if I can add on to Stacy, I have a great example of that. One of the properties I've had the honor to work with early on, they were one of the visionaries, I'll say. They saw the potential and they've adopted the technology. And one of the things they did is their marketing campaigns. So a marketing campaign, 3 stages, right? There's the preparation of the marketing, getting everything loaded, so to speak, pulling the trigger and executing it, and then getting the feedback loop to optimize and correct. Well, what they did, they adopted the technology to automate step number 1. So they turned guest segmentations, that's bringing in information to, for lack of a better word, Stacy, cluster and kind of put your guests into certain buckets or categories, and then aligning the offers or whatever you're going to put out there for them to get their player loyalty and make it sticky. That was all manual before, and that was people hunting and pecking in databases and doing all that. They automated that, and what they turned around was typically a week's worth of several people's work into a couple of hours. Now, from a competitive point of view, that's tremendous return on investment, right? Because you're going to do this many times a month, 12 months in a year. That's incredible return on investment. Now, and what the great thing is, it only gets better. As Stacy mentioned, these algorithms are running. When you combine that with real-time data, and now that feedback loop into optimizing those segmentations and those offers can happen in real time. And when you think of the opportunities available with that, you can now, instead of waiting for the end of your campaign to end to assess the lift or whatever metrics you're looking at, you now can do it in real time. And then you can twist the knob, so to speak, like, okay, let's crank this up, based upon what the algorithm's telling us, and then see if there's a response. You don't have to wait weeks to do that anymore. You can do that in fairly real time, and that is extremely powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Stu. I mean, I hesitate to talk about segmentation sometimes because I think that there's even some automated methods that I find a little bit uncomfortable. But adding the opportunity for your segmentation to learn from the feedback, I think is incredibly powerful, because you can't do infinite experiments on a marketing campaign, unfortunately. But having that feedback is incredibly important. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Thank you, Stu. And I think that was a really great answer. So, I guess the next question is, what does a casino need to be able to implement AI? And we're talking about recovery, and a lot of this is about going forward and using this new technology to become, run a better business, to look for efficiencies and stuff like that. But what does a casino need to implement AI? Either one.
Well, they need tons of data, or not. I mean, if you have small data, that can be okay too, as long as you have an appropriate AI. But I mean, most casinos are going to have that data accessible with or without quite a bit of effort. And I think that, you were talking about it earlier, Victor. It's about that entrepreneurial spirit. It's about that willingness to, and I think Stu mentioned that willingness to be brave and to, try something new. And I think that was the answer before the pandemic. And that's the answer now for recovery, is that with that opportunity out there, it's really about embracing technology and being willing to try something new.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't worry about the big casinos. They seem to be taking care of themselves. And my concern usually is the small ones, my heart and my mind always goes out to them, because I know they're the ones that play it closer to the bone. They're these casinos are created not to establish great wealth, but for jobs and opportunities within the communities. And that's why it's so important that, that we, as leaders in the industry, are making sure that they're not left behind too. So, and it's not that complicated to get AI. It's just really having a plan, understanding what's out there, and then hopefully finding someone like Stu and Stacy and nQube, you guys, to really help you understand. How is this going forward? What do you see AI being really helpful for in the near future? And I know we've talked about segmentation, we talked about customers, but what have I missed?
Well, I'll take the short term and the long term, Victor. So the short term, one, is not being used widely, across tribal Indian country. But there's 400 and something properties out there, or tribes with casinos, and I'm trying to do the math in my head really quickly. I've worked with a small percentage of that. But in the short term, and I know it's a really relative phrase, the short term, but I think the main driver is competitiveness. You need to compete, whether you like it or not. You're going after a finite amount of resources, and everybody's doing it. So unless you have the most remote resort and casino in the world with a large metropolitan area next to you, you're competing. And you just need to face that fact. And AI, doing more with less, making better, augmenting your decision-making will allow you to be more competitive. And without a doubt, those that are adopted will start creeping ahead of the competition. Now, like I don't know, nuclear warfare, once somebody gets a set of nukes, the other group's got to get the set of nukes, right? So I was like, okay, mutually assured destruction kind of thing. They get it. They're starting to grab they're grabbing our market share from us. We need that same technology. So then the playing field starts leveling. And then for the long term, I think it's just to survive, just to survive in this industry. The old ways won't get you to where things are going. Online, sports book, how do I compete in that world? Everything's digital today. If you're doing things on paper, just fix that. Join the digital world. And I think so. Both short term is competitive. Increase your competitive strength, and then long term, it's just to survive in the industry. I think you're going to have to adopt this stuff.
That's same question goes to you, and Stacey. For me, it's like the casinos, you hear, online's going to come, casinos are going to be obsolete, people are going to stay, we just went through a pandemic. People can't wait to get out of their house and interact with other people. So I think the mythology about, people, once they go to an online casino, they're going to stop visiting land-based casinos. I think that's proven to be pretty false, unless you don't have any pants, then I understand why you wouldn't want to go to a casino. But, and who knows, after this pandemic, but Stacey, how do you see, what am I missing? How can what kind of messaging can I give the tribes for AI? Help me here.
Sure. So, I think it's like Stu said, it's incredibly important to be competitive moving forward. And I think that, even if it's not a sexy algorithm, even if it's not something that you're going to throw out there and be like, we're using this hot new technology, even something that's happening in the background, you can get a considerable uplift in your revenue. You can see considerable efficiencies at your property. So it doesn't have to be this, big flashy type of technology. It's just a matter of finding efficiencies and being able to take advantage of them. I would also add, similar to that light, it's, there's a buyer beware aspect here as well. So Stu said it right in the beginning of this conversation. AI has been around since the 50s. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking about it. And that's because it's more accessible. But, the business world has also taken advantage of it as a buzzword. And I think that things like this are really helpful in, just allowing people to learn about AI and what it's capable of. So it doesn't just become, a word that's in the background, we use AI, so we're automatically better. Well, no, like there are certain problems that you need to solve, and can this AI do it for you? And I think it's okay to ask very specific questions of the, whatever the path you're taking, whether you're buying a product, whether you're hiring a consultant, whether you're hiring somebody to be in-house and work with you, it's okay to ask the questions like, well, how exactly is this going to help me with my problem? What are you targeting? And, I think webcasts like this are just incredibly helpful for getting that message out.
Well, first of all, I'm not saying goodbye, but first of all, thank you guys so much for agreeing to speak to the audience, because like you said, I think AI can be misinterpreted as something that is unattainable, and it's something a little scary, and it really is right there at your fingertips, and it's very important. Stu, you're going to say something real quick?
Yeah, I was going to say, Stacy brings up an excellent point. You go back, I guess, in the Great West, we had the snake oil salesman. It is buyer beware. Do your homework. I've known so many properties at this point where they heard this great thing, they went and bought it, instead of doing the homework and saying, calling other casinos, are you using this technology? How did it work out? Or, Stacy and I know that most machine learning algorithms or data science or deep learning, name a branch of AI, mostly these algorithms are open source. They're out there. They're documented. If you want to do this, just Google it. You'll get the algorithm, basically. Implementation is left as a homework assignment, but it's all open source. And when I hear vendors come in and say, well, we have a proprietary algorithm, the radar goes off immediately, and questions, they just, that, to me, that's if there was one thing, if I could advise a resort and casino on who's bringing in a vendor and you ask them about what algorithm they're using and they go, oh, it's proprietary, I run for the hills. So
Stu, you're killing me here. You're killing me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Don't, I did not mean that.
Take it back on. We can edit that out. Don't worry, Stu. We'll take that right out. But you know what he's saying, though. You know what I mean? And I think what he's talking about, what he's trying to say is that, once the word gets in, all of a sudden you have people that have no purpose using the word AI, and it becomes a buzzword and a sales word and stuff like that. And I think that's how I took him to say it. And there are a lot of snake oil salesmen, and so that's where the line was cut, Stacey. You went way above that. You weren't even close. But that's and I've seen that. You know what I mean? That becomes the buzzword, and that becomes sale. And there's not much I, much less A in that. You know what I mean? And so Stacey, so what advice do you have? Well, first of all, we have a question right here too, and this is from Brad Gold. He goes, which AI platform do you use or recommend? Now, this is an interesting question. There is no one platform, right?
Yeah, I'm going to grab that one just so I can also respond to Stu. So despite the joke, we actually do build all of our stuff in-house, no downloads. So,
right.
But to your point, that is extremely rare because there are a bunch of algorithms out there right now that you can just go download. And that's just part of this, growing enthusiasm about AI and the growing caution towards AI as well. I mean, especially people that grab them without knowing how they work. So to that, because we build all of our stuff in-house, I don't know the answer to that question about which AI platform that's out there is necessarily the best one. So Stu, I mean, maybe you're more familiar with the breadth of things that are out there. So I'll stop talking.
Yeah, there's a large, number one, Google. I mean, they're the ones that really champion this commercially. And this is a I don't want to dance around the answer to the question. I'll try to keep it short, Victor. I won't be an attorney and give you a 30-minute answer. But people are using AI every day. If you use Netflix, if you buy something from Amazon, if you buy something from Target online, eBay, Walmart, they're all using AI in some aspect. it's transparent. It's happening under the covers. And that is why I find, if management kind of pushes back on the power of this technology, I bring out those examples. You're using it every day. The platforms they're using range. There's so many companies out there saying we're AI, please bring us in, but they're monster companies. My recommendation is that before you entertain those people, before you bring in Stacy's company, or before you do something with AI, fix your data architectures. That would be my main recommendation. It's old, it's 1970s, it's falling over, you won't scale. Never mind bringing in something like a sports car like AI. You need to start upgrading the plumbing underneath. And then this AI will just, I won't say seamlessly, but the friction experience and the amount of failures you'll experience bringing this technology in will be far less easier. It'll be easier bringing it in. You'll have less friction. You'll have less failures. You'll be more successful. But you got to upgrade the foundation of the house first, and then build, the fancy faucets in the bathrooms on top of it.
Yeah, that's great point. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. So Brad, as you say, there's really no one. It's really important that you do your research, and I would highly recommend reaching out to Stacy and Stu and other people of this caliber. You know what I mean? And having people that you can trust. And that was the reason why I brought them both here, because they're two people that I know personally and that I admire intellectually. So I think it's very important to have someone, a guide that can help you through this, because it's not, it seems very simple, but it can be very confusing. So my last question to both of you, what advice do you have, and this is the last question of the day, what advice do you have for those thinking about using AI? And Stacy, let's start with you, since you got beat up pretty bad on that last one. Just kidding.
Thanks. I think the message is, we've talked about it a lot. I think that the take-home message is embrace it, learn about it. It's really going to allow you to take advantage of opportunities that are coming up with the pandemic recovery. And again, buyer beware. Just as long as you're talking to people and doing your research and understanding what problems that you want to solve at your casino, I think the path will become clear as you start having those conversations.
Wow, thank you. And Stu, same question to you, sir.
I would say learn, get educated. I saw one of the most heartwarming stories being in this space where on LinkedIn, I saw someone post, as a chief financial officer for some property, I won't name where, but she just announced that she had taken a data analytics class at the local university. I mean, that was just an amazing thing to see, that, like it or not, this will, overwhelm you at some point unless you get educated. It's like anything else, learn about taxes, learn about this. In order to understand it, you don't have to become an expert in it. You have to understand the basics. And there are so many online classes that are available. Just Google something like data analytics class or data science class, and you'll be overwhelmed with returns. And I think becoming more data literate, I think, is a really good step.
You know what? I think you're absolutely right. And you know what? And we ended up just on time. Again, Stacy, Stu, thank you so much for being here. I thought this was a wonderful conversation. I think we did a lot of good here today. Unfortunately, Jason couldn't make it. He's busy as usual. But again, I want to thank my guests. I'd like to thank all the viewers. Brad, thank you for that really good question. And we will continue this conversation in about 6 months. I'd like to hear, once we get opening, what we're seeing, what the reality is, and where we can go and from there. So again, thank you to Dr. Stacy Baran from beautiful Winnipeg, my dear friend Stuart Kerr from here from Southern California. I'd like to thank Ashley and Mary Charlotte and Sam in the back for helping me out. So thanks everyone. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.